Well, hello there, Homo sapiens. I'm trying to figure out why my head is so big. Oh, there it is. Okay. Haha. I have to listen to my big head. Welcome to topic 2, the longest topic in the history of the Earth, or in this case, IP bio. We will not be going over all of topic 2 before midterms. We're going to try and hit topic 2.1 through 2.4. So we're going to leave all proteins and enzymes and all that fanciness for after midterms. Going to get through some basic stuff. I was looking through it though. I feel good about you guys having some prior knowledge about these things and that we've already talked about some of these things. So we're basically going over macromolecules and a little bit of like the specifics of each. So molecular biology, just think of how like molecules, right? On a molecular level, how that affects living things. There's a beautiful picture. Wait, that did she put it in this one? Miss Paulson had? I was dying. I was like, yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh, here it is. I was like, oh, let me also show them that first. Don't write this down. And just say, yeah, it's just super simple. It's just, molecule to metabolism. Okay. So in this lecture, right, 2.1, we will be going over, sorry, about that, your metabolism, right? So, well, not just yours, like in general, metabolism, what does that mean? The difference between anabolic and catabolic metabolism, organic versus inorganic, which you've actually already kind of covered, the different macromolecules, how we go from monomer to polymer, and the structures, and then vitalism, right? So those are our main topics for today. Let's start with metabolism. Okay, so again, do not draw this down. Do not. Are you listening? Do not draw this down. So this is basically what we are going to be looking at for like the entire topic too. We've got our macromolecules, right? We've got carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. Nucleic acids are going to be in our amino acid synthesis. So the processes that build them up and the processes that take them apart, how energy is transferred within there, the different parts of our bodies that do different things, then the big chemicals, the molecules that are involved with that, right? So on a molecular level, it's kind of like feels very not biology, not living, but talking about like the big picture, how that comes out to what that looks like in our bodies and living things' bodies. Okay, so let's start with metabolism. So metabolism is a word you're probably somewhat familiar with. Just keep moving my head around. Right, we talked about a little bit with the characteristics of life. But metabolism, or straight definition, is all the chemical reactions that happen in cells or organisms, right? So all the chemical reactions. So what we call our metabolism is just like that. But like if we say fast metabolism, that means like those processes, those chemical reactions happen very quickly. Usually we talk about in the context of food, right? That our bodies break down food very quickly. If they have a slow metabolism, they don't break down food as quickly or burn food as quickly, all right? But metabolism in general, humans, plants, right? Anything that has cells or organisms is the total chemical reactions. These chemical reactions are controlled by proteins. We've already talked about proteins with mitosis, right, and cell division, and how important those things are in our body. Just remember that proteins do everything in our body because enzymes are proteins, right? So they are controlled by this, our gene activation, right, our expression. So our DNA holds the directions for how to make those proteins and then when they'll be activated. And then there's two key reasons or function of metabolism. One is to provide energy and then to break things apart and put things together, right? So one is to break things apart to give us energy to either growth or reproduction, right? It's for cellular processes. And the other one is to enable, right? To make possible the synthesis, making, or assimilation, putting together of new materials for use in a cell, right? Energy, synthesis, assimilations. And they can be one of two things. They can be anabolic or catabolic. Anna is breaking things up, Cat is breaking things down, but we'll talk about that in the next slide. Okay. And then we'll also talk about inorganic or organic materials. All right. So two types of metabolism are anabolic and catabolic. So anabolic reactions are things that build people up. Remember, like Anna, hold on just a second. Sorry, something was being funky. But anyways, anabolic build things up, right? So building things up from simple to complex. So you can look down here. We're going to talk about condensation and then hydrolysis. So you can remember or like bring what your prior knowledge of condensation. Sorry, I hate sorry. Positive. There you go. What that means, right? So condensation means for water to come out. And so we're taking these very simple molecules, right? So monomers, mono meaning one, putting together, and then condensation is by adding water. Um, I'm sorry, with the addition of water that's coming out here, it's going to, like, water is a byproduct and it comes together and creates covalent bonds, right? So those strong bonds. So condensation reaction, like, puts the things together and the water comes out, right? So this is building up complex molecules from very simple ones. That is the opposite, right, of catabolic. Catabolic is when I use the process of hydrolysis and water is used to break it apart, right? So if you go back to like photosynthesis, do you remember how water was a part of that, right? So that plants take sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide, and they put it together to make a carbohydrate, right? That glucose. And then that process, like, water is a reactant. And then when it's broken down, water is a product, right? So you kind of remember those things, right? Breaking down and putting them together, if that helps you. If that doesn't, just ignore what I say. So catabolic reactions break complex into simple ones, right? So it takes these polymers, these big molecules, and breaks them into simple ones or monomers. Okay. When covalent bonds are broken, because water is being added, we get energy released as well, right? So catabolic is going to release that energy. Okay. So let's talk about our 4 organic compounds that basically outline the rest of topic 2, the topic that never ends, right? So anything that contains carbon, with the exception of carbonates and oxides from carbon, are called organic, right? So our 4 organic molecules that we'll be talking about: carbohydrates, lipid, proteins, and nucleic acids, right? Those are our organic compounds. So when you're looking at the store, it's like organic food. That's not what they mean. In college, you can take a wonderful series of classes called organic chemistry, 3 of them. And that actually includes, it's just all carbon-based chemistry. You take 3 classes after your general chem, you take organic chem, and you're just talking about how carbon moves around in your body. It's really, I actually really like those courses. But anyway, the reason why, if you recall from chemistry, if you didn't take it, that's okay, is that because carbon has those 4 empty spaces in its outer orbital, it can bond with a lot of different things, right? Carbons can bond with anything that has 2 or 4 or 3. Like, it can just make a bunch of different molecules based on that simple carbon configuration. Right? So a large variety of complex and very stable, because it fills out that outside electron orbital, and then it will no longer react. Do you need to write this down? Nah. In case you loved chemistry, you do not need to know electron orbitals. Just know that it has 4 places where it can make bonds. Okay. All right. So here are the 4 I keep talking about: carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. You do need to know the simple form of them, so the monomer, and then the complex form. Like, I know you guys covered this your freshman year, but I also know that it's probably old information. So we're just going to go back through it. I'm going to have you guys make a chart here in a second. So just know that these are the 4 main classes that we're going to be talking about, and that there's complex things. Those are the complex, the big ones. And then the smaller units are called monomers, right? Mono meaning one. And those monomers that all come together, right, to make the polymer. So you need to know the monomers and then the polymers and then what they're called in their compound. The only exception that we've actually already talked about with the cell membrane is lipids right here, that may have these subunits that come together, but they're not always reoccurring. So carbohydrates, my monomer is a monosaccharide. Proteins, my monomer is amino acid. Nucleic acids are made of nucleotides, but lipids come together with fatty acids and monoglycerides. So they're considered their monomers, but they're not repeating in a certain order that makes them comes together to make that lipid. You just need to know those 2. Okay. All right. Let's start with our carbohydrates and lipids. I thought I had a slide. I do, but that's later. Yeah. Okay. Carbohydrates and lipids. So my monomer of my carbohydrate, right, is a monosaccharide. Anything that's a saccharide in it is sugar, right? So monosaccharide, polysaccharide, you're looking at a certain types of sugars. You can remember that carbohydrates right? Lots of sugar and carbohydrates. Some very common examples of carbohydrates in our bodies are, and all living things are glucose and ribose. Ribose is part of DNA, right? Deoxyribose, right? RNA, ribonucleic acid. So that is why they're common in our bodies. So talking about simple forms of energy, and then also one of the elements of building up of our DNA. Okay, and so here are how those are constructed. Again, you don't need to know those right now. You can put like this ring. That means that there's a carbon in each one, but you can see that it's basically like all the different materials just put together different, which makes a different compound. Okay, again, lipids, going back to lipids, they do not have monomers. They have subunits, right? So our subunits, here's an example of a fatty acid. We'll look at saturated and unsaturated lipids in a little bit, but you can see that this is a chain versus a circle, right? A ring. So these are called rings of carbons. These are called chains of carbons. So no monomer, but possible subunit are called fatty acids. Our other two are proteins and nucleic acids. So the monomer of a protein is an amino acid. There are 20 that exist in our body that code for just all of the different types of proteins, right? The thousands and thousands of types of proteins in our body. Because if there's 20, think of like all the possible combinations of putting 20 different amino acids together in threes to create those amino acids. To put the amino acids together, make the protein. So all those different possibilities. Okay. Again, we've got a carbon here in the middle. Why it's called the amino, you can remember that N here. It has that nitrogen base here, and then the nucleic acids also contain that nitrogen base here. This is just a nitrogen group. This is a base because it has those closed rings. So the monomer of my nucleic acid is a nucleotide, right? So RNA and DNA have differences, the deoxyribose versus the ribose nucleic, but just know that those are my monomers for a nucleotide that makes up nucleic acids. Okay. All right. So here's the chart. Yay. Go ahead and copy down this chart for now, or pause it and copy it down. But this is basically talking about putting that into a summary of the monomer, what the polymer is. That's it. We haven't gone over polymers on those slides. And then the bond that's involved. Some of these bonds we're just going to memorize. Some of them you just need to know. And we'll talk about some mnemonic devices, like ways to memorize those things. Okay. The simple subunits that come together make these polymers. So the only additional information that we are putting in here is that monosaccharides come together to make polysaccharides. My subunits of lipids come together to make triglycerides. Amino acids link together to make polypeptide proteins. And nucleotides come together to make either DNA or RNA, deoxyribonucleic acid and ribonucleic acid. Just pause the screen and copy it down. All right, so here's some pictures of those things. You do not need to add these to your notes right now. Do not add, but just so you can see, like the constructions of carbon look very different in different molecules, right? So here's an example of a polysaccharide. Here's a glycagon. Here is a polypeptide, right? A fibrous protein. Lots of different things we'll talk about with proteins. And here's a nucleic acid wrapped up in a deoxy. That means it's the thing. Remember, the RNA are single strands. Okay, and the last thing we're going to cover here is vitalism. Vitalism. So a little bit of history here with Frederick Wöhler. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. Wöhler. Good old Frederick. There you go. Historically, it was believed that living processes, so before we knew about metabolism, they called it vitalism, right? So there's vital forces, vital meaning life, that come together and they make organic molecules. So like there was this conception or like idea of metabolism before we actually put that name and knew those molecules, but at the time it was called vitalism. And that is what kind of dictated like how organic molecules came together, not dictated, but like it recorded, right? Those, like their thoughts on how those things came together. Okay. So our famous scientist here, 1828, he disproved this theory of vitalism by putting together these artificial inorganic salts. So before he came about, oh my gosh, there it is.